Hello and welcome to the third tutorial on databases. We're using LibreOffice Base. This one is going to be on forms and how we can add a user interface to our database. So the purpose of a form is to protect your database from anybody that is either nefarious or incompetent. You don't want people, even yourself, from operating directly on the tables. That is generally regarded as a big no-no in the database world. So instead, you expose an interface. And so we're going to create a graphic user interface using forms in LibreOffice Base, and these are what you should use to interact with the database. If you ever need a form that does something different, then you just create another form. So this is how it works. Let's take a look. You're going to start with, this is the tutorial that you're going to run through. This video will be linked right here. I'm going to move it slightly off screen so I can reference it. And then what you'll want to do is open your existing database that you've been working with all this time. So this time we've got our tables. Make sure you've got all three tables and artist genres and artists or albums. And then make sure you've established the relationships between them that look like this. Otherwise, this won't work. So, the first two forms that we're going to have to create, and these ones are actually more like supplemental helper forms. These don't really, you wouldn't necessarily work exclusively on these, but we're going to create forms for the artists and genres table. And these will use kind of like a data sheet style form. So here, I'll show you how it works. We'll click on Use Wizard to create form because it's the easiest way to do it. We will select artists as our table, and we'll just pop both of these fields over into our into the box. So these are both of the fields that we'll include in our form. You'll notice actually behind this dialog there's actually the form interface. So there's actually buttons over here to add things like buttons and text boxes and drop downs and images. You can pretty much put whatever you want in a form. It's actually really neat. And you can use calculated fields to update data in databases. There's actually an incredible amount of power here, despite the ugly interface. Next, we don't need a subform, so once again, next. We'll use the datasheet style for this one, just because it's going to make our lives a little bit easier. Yeah, you could do these, but we want to display all the data, so this is how we'll arrange the controls. Next. This form is to display all data. We'll just leave that radio box checked in. Don't check any of these boxes, and we'll hit next. So here's the big downside to using Base, which is that it's not a very pretty program. Most of these color schemes are pretty awful. They're pretty ugly to look at. So I don't hate the bright blue one. I'll use that one for all of my forms. So it's a little bit darker, and I prefer darker backgrounds on things. So I'll hit next, and we'll call this artist's form. And we'll go straight into working with the form. We'll hit finish. And here we are. So you can resize this a little bit if you want, but this is it. This is a form, and it doesn't look any different from the table, kind of. However, what it does have is it will you need this form in order to do what we want to do for the albums table. So you can add new ones just by hitting the plus, say 107, and we'll add the squirrel nut zippers. You don't have to add anything. I'm just using this one as an example. And then we can that has added it to the table, and you can even verify that by going into the table itself and scrolling to the very bottom, and it's right there, number 107. So we're going to do the same thing, the exact same process for creating the genres table. We'll select our genre, or genres form. Select both fields, hit next. No need for a subform. We'll also use the data tables or data sheet style, and yep, we're going to have display all data. I'm going to go with the bright blue again. It's not really a bright blue. Hit next. We'll call this genres form, and yeah, check work with form, and we'll see it pop up. And just to make sure it's all there, yep, everything's there. And we're good to go. So you can also add other records on here too by just typing them in, but we're not going to for this one because you already saw how it's done. Typically you wouldn't use something like this to add records, but in this case it's not a huge sin because it's a personal database and it won't be that big of a deal. You can use a datasheet style form for when you have a relatively small number of categories in for any table that has a relatively small number of records. And those two forms are those two tables happen to have very few records. Okay, so here's the hard one. We'll use the wizard once again. And it popped up on the wrong screen, so I'll bring this back over. This time we are going to add only these top words. So these are the two foreign key fields. We're not going to use those. We're just going to add these three. So we'll add ID, name, and year. I misspelled year. I'm going to fix that. Album. Edit. Year. Save. Yeah. Fixed it. Yeah, we'll create a new form now. Use wizard, create a new form. Yeah, there we go. ID, name, year, not yar. Next. We don't need a subform. This time I want to do this columnar with let's do the labels on the right. I like them kind of like lined up with these, so I think this looks a little bit nicer. I mean, there's no form in base that looks nice, but this is as good as we're gonna get. I don't know, it looks kind of cool. So we'll hit next. This form is to display all data. Yes, don't check anything else. Apply styles. We'll go again with bright blue, I guess. And we'll hit next. And we'll call this albums form. I'm just adding the word form onto the end of these so that, you know. Oh, and so this is it all set up. You can't actually add new records with this because it'll be missing 2 required fields. Or maybe it'll just leave those fields blank. I'm not sure how it would do it, but we want to have all fields showing on this. So what I'll do is I'm going to close this, but you can see how you can like search through it. If I typed in, you know, something in here, it might pop up. So let's close it again, and let's go back to the albums from here. Right click and hit edit. So that'll bring up this for editing, and we can add new interface items. So what we want to add is a box for artist and genre. So let's start with artist. There's two tools that do kind of a similar thing. There's list box and combo box. Don't use combo box. I tried. There's no way to get it to do what we want it to do correctly. It's more if there's a very specific field that you want to edit. This one we want the names from the name field and the IDs to record in this table, because if you'll see what I mean. Let's create a list box. So you just click on the tool and create a box here. And so what we want is you'll see all the tables from the data sources. Choose the table from which the data should be used as the basis for the list. So the list will be the artists' names, so we'll click on artists. And the display field, the field that we're going to display in this box, will be the artist's name. So that artist's name, hit next. And then but we don't necessarily, that's not the field that we want to save or store. We want the IDs. So so in the artist album table, we want the artist ID field to get populated by values from the artist ID field in the artist table. So these are the two. So just change them both to artist ID. If you use the same field names as me, this will be really just a snap. And you hit finish. Make this a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit wider. Another thing that's nice to add would be a text box. So I'm going to grab the text box and add a box right here that says artist. Now, you can monkey around with like font styles and stuff. Maybe we can go with something a little bit lighter. I don't know how to get that color, whatever that is. Let's just make it white. Yeah, that looks good. It's good. It's bigger text. Maybe even a different font. I'm not sure. No. It's difficult to match the styles, and these are very hard to edit, so I'm not going to worry about it, and I'm not going to force you guys to make it look exactly right or make it perfect or anything like that. So if you get it looking something like this, we'll be good to go. So we'll create another list box. I'll make it roughly about the same size so the thing looks nice. We'll go to genres next. We want genre name to be the display field, and we want the IDs to be the correlated fields. So genre ID, finish. And then once again, we'll grab a text box, put it over here, say genre. We'll right align it and pick that kind of grayish color there. Looks good. Looks good. Just before we move on to the next part, I do want to kind of open this so that you guys can see what it looks like. Save. So we close it and we open it, and then here's what you can see. You can see all the different artists here, and you can see the genres. And if you just kind of scroll through the different records here, why does it say there's only 41? There's more than that. It's really weird. Yeah, 190. So yeah, you can see all of the different records that are represented here. So, and you can scroll through them and it'll automatically update these fields, which is really cool. The drop-downs work, which is what we want. So let's make some other little interface tools here. We'll edit the form once again, and we want to add some buttons. So normally the tools for like navigating the table or the form are just like on that little bar on the bottom when the form is open for working. But instead we're going to add our own buttons, because what you can do is you can hide this interface here and kind of make it like a little app that your user would open up. And so in order to do that, we want it to look a little bit more complete. So we're going to add push buttons. So they're right here above. You can add pictures and things like that. You can add all sorts of things. So underneath combo box is push button. And we'll have like a add new record button up here. So push button looks like this. If you double click on it, it brings up a little dialog. Mine appeared off screen for some reason. And you can say what you want in it. So I'm just going to put a big plus sign in this. So it's like, create a new record. In fact, I'm going to make it centered. Yeah, I want it centered. And then I want to make it a little bit bigger, like 20 points. Yeah, just a big plus sign. Looks good. Just put that in the middle. Okay. So you can monkey around with the font, and so basically these are all the possible settings that you can set up for this, and it gives you kind of like a nice little grid that you can lay things out on. I probably could have been a little bit more meticulous about how I laid things out on the grid, but I didn't. I was working quickly. The next thing we want to do is give it so right now the button is there, but it doesn't do anything, so we'll give it an action. And we'll click on this action and say, I want you to create a new record with this action. So now when a user clicks on this button, it will create a new record in this table. And then what I want you to do is go through and create a few more, like a backward and a forward button, and a submit button. Let's do the submit button. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna copy this button here, and then hit paste, and then it'll be right there. It's cheating, I know, but we'll call this one submit as our label. Maybe make the font size back down a little bit. We'll go down to 12. Yeah, and then the action will be submit form. So this is basically you fill in a form, you hit submit, and then so you hit new, you fill in the form, you hit submit, and that adds it to the database. Let's create another couple buttons here. So paste. There we go. I'm gonna create like a backward and a forward button right here. Let's put a right. There we go. This one is going to be the previous button, so we'll just kind of fake an arrow with a angle bracket and a dash, and then go down to action and then hit previous record, and then we'll copy this and paste it and drag it back over, And this time we'll do dash and a forward chevron. And our action will be next record. And then finally, just in case we want to do something like this, we'll copy this guy again, and then paste it in. We'll create a delete button. I'm trying to get it lined up with this one over here, so it looks kind of nice. No, it's not, but double click on it. This time we'll put a big X on it, just because it makes us think of deleting, and put delete record. So there we go. So we have our form created. So let's test it. So save it, close it. It'll probably ask you to save it again. Go to albums form. Okay, there it is. So if we hit these arrows, it scrolls through all of our albums. If we hit the plus, it will create a new one. Now we could say we wanted to create the album Hot from 1996 for the Squirrel Nut Zippers. There it is. So if you can just start typing the letters of the name of the artist, they'll pop in there. And that's a jazz album. And then if I hit submit, that saves the record. So see, now we have 191 records. And if we go back in here in our tables, you'll see that there is, in fact, not a new one. Close this. Go back to this and hit. Maybe I have to close it. You know what it maybe has to be. It has to. I bet the form has to be save. The form button has to be saved. So this is, see, we make mistakes. So instead of submit, albums form, edit, I think the action has to be save. Submit form will have save record. Here we go. Save. Close this. Yes. What's another Squirrel Nut Zippers album? I'm trying to look this up really quickly. Yeah, that's a good one. Albums form. We'll create a new one. We'll do Sold Out, which was their next album from 1997 by the Squirrel Nut Zippers. Jazz. No, it's not Jazz Fusion. It's just jazz. Oh, whatever. Jazz Fusion. And then when you hit that, it'll submit it and save it. So, and presumably now, if we open up the table again, they'll both be there at the bottom, Hot and Sold Out, with the correct artist ID and genre. Well, this isn't the right genre. We'll make that correct. Anyway, if you get it working right, if you get it working, reasonably well so that this form does most of what it's supposed to do, you're good to go. Submit it. Remember, even minor errors don't really cause any huge problems with any of this stuff. So go ahead and submit it, and we'll see you in the next tutorial, which will be on queries. Scratch that. I'm coming back so that I can go through this submission process again. I'm doing this kind of as a favor, just trying to make sure that everybody's on the same page about how these get submitted, because this file is saved on your computer. It's not in Google Drive. I mean, you could save it in Google Drive, especially if you're on a Chromebook. That might just kind of automatically be where you put it. But since on a Chromebook you're using the so what I was saying is, I mean, if you have it on Google Drive, you can submit it via Google Drive. It's not a bad idea. And if you're on Chromebook, I don't know, you'd be using the Linux subsystem, so it would be, it might save it locally. I'm not sure. But you can probably set it up however you like. So anyway, I have the file stored locally on a folder on my desktop, which is not where I usually like to keep folders, but for the purposes of this tutorial, it makes my life a little bit easier. So I'm going to drag it down here, paste it in here, and then submit it. But you can also save it in your Google Drive and then submit it from there. So submit, done, uploads the file, and that is that. So we'll see you in the next tutorial.